Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. And today it's my pleasure to be with commercial real estate broker and one of the founders of Hayes Commercial Real Estate Group, Francois DeJohn, knower of all things, expert in all commercial real estate trends, and a real local icon in this community. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm so grateful. How are you doing today, Francois?
No, thanks, Josh. I appreciate the nice intro, and I'm doing great. Yeah, doing good. Look forward to your questions and sharing any insight I can on what's going on in the commercial real estate market in the Santa Barbara area. Look forward to the questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You are an expert, so let's dive right in. I want to talk to you about a whole bunch of topics today, kind of go over the South Coast and all the commercial real estate areas from Coast Village to Camino Real. We'll get there. But first, I kind of want to start off with something that you are a real expert in, you've been dealing with lately, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to talk to you about what's happening with commercial real estate office space in terms of some of these big companies, these tech companies, and the return to work, and who's coming back to work, who's not. How is remote work affecting that industry? And what do you do if you're leasing these large commercial spaces, or is there sub-leasing going on? Can you talk a little bit about that world and what we're seeing right now?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, COVID was kind of a black swan event and created a situation where everyone had to start working from home for a period of time. And what in pretty much the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen many people work from home that were not used to working home, got used to it, and with using all the tools like Citrix and Zoom and Teams and all the other remote working, technology, because they had to. What's interesting to me is, this work from home kind of dynamic was already going on before COVID hit. Interestingly, Go to My PC, which was later bought by Citrix, was actually developed in Goleta, believe it or not. And that was, one of the enabling tools to allow us to all work from home. And I myself been working from home for many, many years, even well before COVID, just because I found it to be better for my work style and I enjoyed it. But I think what COVID did is it kind of threw propane on this work from home, flexible work schedule where people had to adapt, especially the high-tech companies. High-tech companies, have gone to a very flexible work schedule and have continued to support that flexible work schedule for their employees. And whereas I would say there's other type of office uses like mine, professional services and medical type offices, I think, are generally back working in the office. I would say of 18 people we have at our office, I'd say 16 are there pretty much full time, and if you go to many of the, many of the medical type uses, obviously they're all back at the office. But where the interesting thing has been the high tech space, and the high tech companies like Appfolio and Yardi and Procore and LinkedIn, just to name a few. Those companies are really struggling to get people back to work because I think a lot of their employees really enjoyed working flexible schedules, working from home. A lot of them moved out of the area, did different things. And so I think the work from home dynamic is here to stay with the high tech companies. What I'm hearing is that a lot of the high tech companies locally are starting to encourage their employees to be there 2 or 3 days a week, so they can collaborate and see each other and meet, but they're not requiring it yet. And they're also not foreseeing any full swing back to a 5-day work week at a lot of these software type based companies, which is obviously going to be an interesting dynamic, because if people aren't using their office space, what does that mean for the office market? I can tell you that just last year alone, there was about 200,000 square feet of space that was put on the market for sublease by these high tech companies. And to put that in perspective, we had about 750,000 square feet of office space available at the beginning of 2022. and we ended the year with about 1.1 million square feet of office space on the market. So the vacancy rate went from about 7.5% to 11% on the South Coast, largely due to two things: the high-tech office space being put on the market for sublease, and then also the addition of the Nordstrom's building. The developer that bought that property has also decided to convert that to office, and which may sound kind of contrarian, and it is, but I think there's a reason for that. We can talk about that a bit later. But generally speaking, the downtown office market actually held up pretty well last year because it's mostly dominated by professional services. The vacancy rate, if you actually pulled out the Nordstrom's building, actually went down slightly. There was actually pretty good leasing in office downtown, but there was it was very slow, and I would say the large segment of the office market, which is predominantly in Carpenter Goleta, like anything that was like 10,000 square feet or bigger, was very slow last year, and it continues to be slow this year. And I'm that segment of the market's going to have some challenges, I would say, this year and 2024.
So a couple of things. Let me talk to you about this tech, sort of these larger software tech companies and this trend of workers really enjoying being able to work from home and not doing the 5-day a week. Do you have thoughts on that? Just from a business culture, is that a good thing? Does that work?
Yeah, look, I think we all used to go to office buildings because it was agreed upon, and I think still supported, that people need to meet each other and collaborate and see each other in person. I don't think that's gone away. Okay. But I do think is with the amount of tech software and technology that we have out there these days, Zoom, like we're doing right now. I'm down in Orange County and you're up in Santa Barbara, and we're doing this podcast together. I think it's very possible for people to stay in touch and communicate. And I think on top of that, you have a lot of these tech, younger, I would say younger, kind of 20-somethings, 30-somethings that kind of came up in this, way to work, and are really pushing to stay that way. And, they may have young families that they want to be around. They may have long commutes that they don't want to deal with. And as long as they're productive, and I think they can be measured and they're good employees, my guess is this trend's here to stay. I do think it's going to affect the way we use office. I wouldn't be surprised if we need less office space out there, and we need different office space with hoteling areas and collaboration areas, and the way we design office is going to change for the high tech area. Now, I think the professional service area and manufacturing and R&D, where you actually have to go in and build something at the location, like all of our defense contractors out in Goleta, I don't see that changing that much. I do think maybe some of those companies will be slightly more flexible, but where I'm really seeing the flexibility and the change is these high-tech companies like Appfolio and Procore and all the software-based type groups.
So let me ask you specifically about that. I know when I'm downtown and I'm walking and I pass the Amazon building, which I did recently, I wonder, it's like, Willy Wonka's house, like who goes in, who goes out. I never see anything happening there. And it's this mysterious place. And so I want to ask you, Amazon, as well as these other companies that you've mentioned that have these large spaces and then workers aren't there, are they just empty buildings? Is that what you're saying? Is that there's subleasing efforts going on here and it's just not happening?
So let me give you some specific examples. So Appfolio out in Goleta had 3 buildings, a total of about 160,000 square feet. One building was 80,000 feet, one was 40, and one was 40. And they decided to put the 2 40s on the market for sublease because they just felt like they were never going to come back and use those buildings fully. So they're now using their 80,000 foot building. And if you go out to their parking lot, you'll see cars out there, but they're still only probably in that 30 to 40% occupancy range of people coming. And mostly it's predominantly Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday where the employers like Appfolio and other high-tech companies are being more flexible on Mondays and Fridays. And so that's one example. Then you have another example like LinkedIn, who actually owns their buildings down in Carpinteria. And, they're probably only 20, 30%, occupied, but they own the buildings. you know, and so I guess they could put the buildings on, you know, a building or something on the market for lease, but they haven't. You know, they've decided to keep all their space, and I think they're anticipating that people are going to start coming back more and more this year and next. I think you've probably seen the news where some of even the bigger high tech companies like Apple have started mandating people to come back, you know, 3 days a week, you know, and Disney, and you're starting to see a trend there where I think our local high tech companies, which are obviously not as big, I think they're paying attention to that, and I think you'll start seeing a real push later this year and next year to get more people back. I just don't think it's ever going to be the same. And then the question is, what are the long-term repercussions of that? You know, to make this even a more difficult situation, you have Appfolio doesn't need all their buildings. You know, they have leases that go out 9 years. You know, so really he's got these buildings on the market for sublease, but the owner is really not being affected by this. It's really Appfolio at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so there hasn't really been I would say, a devastating effect on the office market because of all the sublease space yet, because a lot of these leases go out for quite a while. I mean, even the Procore sublease space that's down in Carpinteria goes out about 4 years. You know, and so it's kind of an interesting dynamic. You would think that the market would start having a pretty serious impact, but there really hasn't been one yet. Mostly because the owners aren't really feeling the pinch yet because of the long leases they have in place with these high tech companies.
What kind of a business is a target for, say, Appfolio's 40,000 square foot places that they're trying to sublease? What kind of a business would find that attractive in this environment?
Yeah, so great question. So ironically, there is a business that's actively negotiating on one of the two buildings. That's another high tech company out in Goleta. I can't name, but there is some activity on one of the buildings, and then the other building is actually in shell condition. And you know, you could have a company come along where they want to do more of I would say not just office and creative office, but lab, you know, and R&D. There's a huge demand in Goleta for R&D space. I mean, that's really where the sweet spot is with all those defense contractors and some medical products groups. You'd be surprised at how many companies out there are using lab space and creating products and stuff like that. So that's really where the demand's going to come from. Now, you're going to have some other buildings out in Goleta that I would call non-Class A office buildings. The Appfolio buildings are Class A, but there are some B and C quality office buildings that are going to struggle with vacancy. And I would not be surprised at all if you start seeing talk about converting some of those buildings to more apartments and residential conversions, which makes a lot of sense given what's going on out there with the state housing mandate and the need for affordable housing. And, you know, frankly, we're going to have an office market that has more space than we probably need long term if these work from home dynamics continue.
Yeah, well, better than ag land, right, for housing. But we won't do a political discussion here. But I mean, generally speaking, you know, if we have the land there and unused commercial space, that's a good area for it.
Yeah, I think it's not going to solve the issue. I mean, as you know, we've got the state, and this is another big topic I wanted to talk about today, but the state's basically mandating that we figure out how to put 15,000 units from Carp to Goleta, you know, and we've got about 2,000 in Goleta, 4,000 in the county, I think 8,000 in the city of Santa Barbara. I can't remember what Carp is, but you know, those units are going to go somewhere, and you know, there should be some repurposing of existing properties and buildings that aren't being used. All right, but that's not going to get all the cities and municipalities to where the state wants us, and there's going to have to be some thought into putting them on sites like there that may be ag or old commercial sites. It's very difficult to put residential a lot of time on industrial sites. You know, the industrial market is very tight. It's very desirable. That's the one I would say shining sector in commercial real estate right now is basically multifamily and industrial. And so, you know, rezoning industrial sites to residential is difficult. You know, we need our industrial, we need our manufacturing. You know, if you start putting all of it on that kind of land, you're going to have another problem to deal with. So, you know, it doesn't surprise me that some of the counties and the cities are looking at, you know, some ag land and ag spaces for the housing element.
Right. So let's go downtown. Let's go to State Street, Paseo Nuevo. Let's shift gears a little bit to what's happening in terms of commercial real estate. I've reported a lot on Paseo Nuevo and how obviously there's all this effort to repurpose it, to figure out a way to make it more vibrant. There are those who say it should be just raised, at least the old, the Ortega building over there, and just start over. And there are others who say that, oh, well, it can be something that's more experiential, but the city needs to extend its lease because nobody's going to invest that kind of money unless they have another long-term lease, not something that's going to expire in 42 years or whatever it is. And so there's all that discussion going on, and then you've got Nordstrom's, and I guess it's going to be commercial office space. So can you talk to me a little bit about the future of Paseo Nuevo and where are we at right now, and what does this mean for the Nordstrom building and the old Macy's building, and what's the future look like?
Yeah, well, I wish I could be more positive on State Street, but I've been pretty negative on it for quite a while. I mean, unfortunately, we continue to see retailers throw up their hands and move. I can think of three that have announced that they're moving from downtown Santa Barbara on State Street to Montecito just this year, the first 2 months of this year. Restoration Hardware, Rooms and Gardens, which are both two of our best, I would say home design, furniture type, stores that have been on State Street for decades. They're leaving. They're going to Montecito. And then there's an art gallery that I can't name that's also planning on moving over to Santa Barbara. And there's other people over to Coast Village Road. And there's other groups we continually get calls over at Montecito. I handle a lot of properties on Coast Village Road, and the demand for space over there has been incredible. I mean, and the rents have gone up a lot. I mean, I recently signed a lease with a clothing retailer in a building that I sold that's going to be the highest rent ever paid on Coast Village Road, because that's where a lot of the traffic and a lot of the money has been over there, and it feels better than State Street. I mean, look what's happened in State Street in the last 5 years. You've got Macy's is left, Nordstrom's is left. Who would have thought Starbucks couldn't make it? Starbucks left at the corner of De La Guerra and State Street. I think when I saw Starbucks leave, I was like, oh boy, what are we running into here? I mean, that's Starbucks can't make money. I'm not sure who could. And so it's tricky. I mean, I know in my heart that Paseo Nuevo needs a blend of housing and office to get people back into that area. It's dead. The anthropology building right now is also being looked at as, a conversion to a hotel. The Nordstrom's building is looking at a conversion to office, probably on the second and third floor for sure. First floor could be quasi retail. Macy's is they're thinking of doing office in that building, but that property is also was recently taken back by the bank, and there's a lot of questions and ideas and different things being poked around, and I would say the biggest limiting factor to San Nuevo getting back on its feet is the fact that this it's all on a ground lease, and the city controls that. There's only about 42 years left on the Nordstroms and mall leases. They can, I think, because they're a charter city, they can only extend the lease to 50 years.
That's right.
And,
that's right.
And I've been told that, because of that, that's probably the biggest limiting factor to get residential on that property, because it's going to take a lot more time than that to get a developer to invest that kind of money to either convert or tear down Macy's or Nordstrom's and rebuild it as residential than a 42-year lease. And I think that's a big, big limiting factor, and I'm not sure how to get around that.
Yeah.
I do think the city is well aware that we need housing there and we need people down there, because, Macy's and Nordstrom suck the life out of that whole 700 and 800 block, and it's affecting the other blocks around it as well. I remember a time, I've been downtown I've been doing this for 32 years. I was downtown in the 90s and the early 2000s, where State Street was quite vibrant after the Paseo Nuevo was built. It was the place to go. We used to go and eat lunch there and dinner there and all that. And, over the years, it's just kind of, it's got worse. It's not got better. And I'm really hoping that we can see a big change down there, because, we're going to continue to see, I think, retailers leave the area and locals not visit it. We really need the locals to be back down there. We need people living down there. I mean, that's what's going to bring it back to life, Josh.
Yeah. The best part of Paseo Nuevo is sort of like between Thanksgiving and Christmas and the New Year, because they do all their holiday stuff. And that's really fun. If you are down there during that month, it's a lot of people there, every night for the activities that they put on. But a lot of the other times it just feels very different, particularly if you've been here longer than a minute. If you've been here, you grew up here or been here for a long time, like you remember the mall when it was more vibrant. You said something, and I just wanted to clarify. You said that the Macy's building was taken back by the bank. Is that separate than the actual Paseo Nuevo, or what do you mean?
The same owner owned the Macy's site as the mall.
Okay.
There's basically three main areas there. It's the mall and then the two big department store parcels. But the same owner, Alliance Bernstein, the bank, took back the Macy's and the mall, and so they're the controlling interest there, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And as you probably know, they just spent with Pacific Retail was the previous owner manager. They just spent $20 million updating the mall. It looks beautiful, but there's nobody going there. And so obviously we need to figure out a way to get people there. And that's the best way to do that is, if you did convert the Nordstrom's building to office, you'd have, God knows, 500-600 people probably working in that building. And then if you put residential in the Macy's building or elsewhere on that site, you get a bunch of other people, there at night and during the day. And I think that would really bolster the area. The other big topic is, what do you do with State Street? Do you keep it closed? Do you not keep it closed? I mean, my personal preference would be you keep a portion of it closed. I think it's actually could be an incredible pedestrian experience if it's done right, but it can't look like the kind of the patchwork of outdoor seating areas that we have right now. It just doesn't look right. It looks like a street that was closed and the job wasn't finished, right? So if we're going to keep a portion of it closed, however many blocks that is, I think the city really needs to put some effort into remodeling it and redoing it and making it a true pedestrian area. Right now it just looks like it's kind of it looks like an unfinished project. So
yeah, it's sort of like whatever vision the business owner has for their outdoor dining is what we see, and we know that people are creative in different ways. If you're out there in front of the Chase, I mean, he's got an enormous sort of long, it looks good. It looks nice. It's pretty big, but then you look at some others and it's very inconsistent, and that's, I think people want to sort of know where they're going, that it's going to be a consistent experience for sure. I want to ask you about State Street because, you mentioned Restoration Hardware moving to Coast Village Road. The Forever 21 building has been vacant forever, other than a Halloween store in there. Paseo Nuevo is private property, so you don't have the homeless issue at all there. Yet you still have problems with retail being vibrant and active there. We know on State Street, we hear often from property owners, from business owners, that the city's lack or inability or whatever the city they think is or is not doing to reduce the amount of homelessness on State Street is a problem. How much do you think State Street's problem is homelessness? Because if you look at Paseo Nuevo, you can't be homeless just sleeping there because it's private property and they could move you, but yet they still have some similar retail issues. But can you talk about homelessness and how that interfaces with all these challenges?
Sure. I think, frankly, homelessness is probably the biggest issue for State Street's retail. I don't want to mince any words there. I think we all know that a lot of these people that are there have mental issues and are sick and need our help, and we need to find out a compassionate way to, get them off the street and help them. Because I can tell you right now, I've shown buildings on State Street, and I've had to step over people to get into the front entrance of a door, or they've gone to the bathroom in public areas and it doesn't smell right. And there are companies that I can think of one right now that left State Street is going to Montecito because they were worried about their employees leaving after 5 o'clock in the 900 block. So we can dance around this issue all we want, but the homelessness issue is a big issue on State Street. It is a deterrent. It's a It's a reason why I don't really go down there very often, to be candid. I mean, I'd rather, our office building's at the corner of Garden and Carrillo, and we usually stop at Anacapa and go to a restaurant there. We don't even go over to State Street because I don't really want to deal with half the time what's going on there. It's just kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I've personally never been assaulted, or ever felt like super unsafe, but it sure doesn't feel the way it used to, and it's not as welcoming. And I think part of that, is the big suck that we felt of when Macy's and Nordstrom's leaving. There's just not that much activity there, and it's just and I'm not sure if Macy's and Nordstrom's left because of this. They obviously left because they weren't doing good business and they decided these stores weren't performing. But I also think it's all tied to one another. I mean, again, State Street used to be quite vibrant, and we would get retailers from LA and all kinds of other cities wanting to come here. And we really don't get those calls anymore, Josh. I mean, like it's mostly, most of the leases that we saw last year were local restaurant, bar, restaurant, local retailers. We're not really seeing any of those national retailers investing here because they can see for themselves. You walk up and down State Street, it doesn't feel good. So yeah, I think it's a big problem. We have one of the most beautiful cities in the world. We have some of the most charming architecture in the world. And here we are, in an area where we've had, I think the vacancy between 400 and 1300 block right now is like 14%, the street frontage vacancy. I mean, like every block's got several vacant spots and it doesn't look good. You just go up to San Luis Obispo and walk around Higuera. It feels totally different, and that's an hour and a half from here. And I don't know if that's because, State Street's a lot longer than Higuera or what, but I can tell you right now, it just felt a lot better. And it felt like State Street used to feel where, you walked around, felt good, wanted to go shopping, wanted to go eating. I don't have that feeling anymore.
Yeah, definitely. When you're walking, you just see like these storefronts. You can't go too far, 2 or 3 businesses before you see another vacant storefront. And they do become, some of them, the way their design is, a lot of the unhoused individuals, homeless individuals it's like a place for them to rest, and sleep, and so it becomes sort of an area. What's up with the 400 block? Let me ask you this. How does that adult bookstore, it's been there forever, stay open? Okay, you talk about not being comfortable walking on State Street.
Yeah.
Whenever I park, like, by Santa Barbara Roasting Company, that city lot, and have to walk up to the 400 block, that corner, like I'm uncomfortable around that corner because you have the cigar shop, you got the adult bookstore, there's a couple other, and it has a vibe, that area. In this age of the internet and retail, how does that place stay open? Do you know anything about that place?
I really don't, but I can tell you that property was owned by kind of the infamous or famous Italian family for many, many years. That property sold. And, part of it, I think just last year, the year before, it sold. And I think part of the building's been boarded up for, I don't know, like a decade, and they just didn't care.
It's that old Esau's building, right? Like, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, the 400 block is pretty depressing, candidly. I mean, like, what Peter Lewis is doing behind Staples, I think will really help. I think that's a very good example of what I was talking about earlier, where we got to bring housing and people back to State Street and in the immediate area. I think that will really help. I know that Peter Lewis also owns the building where Invoca is in, used to be Sonos at 419 State Street. Oh, yeah. We have that building for sublease right now. Invoca has decided, they're actually on the far end of the spectrum of this work from home. They've decided they're going to stay completely remote. They don't need their building anymore. And so I've got that building on the market for sublease. Interestingly, we have a local company that's been showing some interest in it. So, but I would say for the last year and a half, it's been crickets. And then all of a sudden, just in the last couple of months, we've had one tenant that looks like they're a good candidate for it. I think that will also bring some life back into the block. I mean, there used to be 200 people working in that building, and now there's like 5.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so that didn't help either. But you're right. That doesn't feel very good walking by the adult bookstore. That's probably one of the worst corners. And that block just seems to be really dead. And then you go into the 500 block and it's, bustling, with all the bars and restaurants. And that's probably the best block from an outdoor standpoint, where I feel like that actually feels like what State Street probably should feel
Yeah.
like. You got, it's very full, a lot of trees in that block too, and it just feels right in the size of the streets, and all the chairs and seating out in front feels pretty good. Doesn't feel like that at the 400 block. Doesn't feel like that in the 600 block. I mean, it's very spotty, actually.
Yeah. I do like that axe throwing place. I think that is on the 400 block. That I did that once when I wrote a story, and that seems fun.
I think we're going to see. I mean, keep in mind the 400 block's the closest block to the funk zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's. I think it would be a much better block if we see more housing built like Peter's doing right now, and we get one of these big buildings reoccupied with some tenants, some people that go actually and eat during the day and all that. I also think that, improving the underpass, which has been talked about for forever, making it more inviting for people to leave the funk zone and come onto State Street, I think that would really help to improve that block. But State Street's a long area. I mean, we've got a 13 block retail corridor, and that's pretty unusual for a lot of towns. And so it's not surprising that we have some blocks that are doing better than others, but I do think that I think we're going in the right direction on the 400 block personally with what Peter's doing. So.
Yeah. And I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about what you referenced before with Coast Village Road. We're seeing some State Street businesses move over to Coast Village Road. I did read in your annual report about how Coast Village Road is actually like really vibrant right now with retail and a variety of other tenants. What is the deal on Coast Village Road? I mean, it's not Montecito. I think like maybe half of it's Montecito, half of it's Santa Barbara. Why is this space so popular right now?
Well, the lower village is actually all Santa Barbara, city of Santa Barbara. It's part of the city. The upper village is the county of Santa Barbara. So, and two of those tenants I told you earlier actually moved to upper village because there wasn't any room for them to go onto the lower village. Lower village is definitely preferred by retailers. There's more activity there. There's more traffic.
Certainly more traffic between about 3 and 6 every day.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think it's this. I think, we've seen the demise of, I would say, of Middle State Street, the 7, 8, 900 block with Nordstrom's and Macy's leaving. I think, the homelessness has definitely not helped. And I think there's a general negativity around the downtown area that something needs to be done and fixed. And in the backdrop, you've got the funk zone exploded. It's doing very well still. I think a lot of people go down there, and then I think the public market / theater district area also feels pretty good. You go to the public market, it's jam packed with people. And then you have Coast Village Road, where, again, it's perceived to be safer. There's less homelessness. And there's been a lot of money that's also moved into this town through COVID. We saw a lot of people move into Montecito from the Bay Area and LA, and I think the demographics are actually supporting, Coast Village Road and Montecito as well. So, I mean, like, if a retailer wanted to be in this area, they're probably going to focus on, probably the Montecito area. They're going to focus on the funk zone, and they're going to focus on maybe that theater district area. Those are the 3 areas that I think are perceived to feel better and safer, and that's where people are gravitating. And we even had something interesting happen recently where there's a property called La Save, which is down by the bird refuge, was purchased by an out-of-town investor, and then they also bought the neighboring property where Stella Mari was, and they're planning on converting that to like a little retail area, right there. And again, I think it'll do well because people are they don't want to be in the downtown core anymore because it just doesn't seem like it's going to get fixed.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of cooperation, Josh, from the city, to get that downtown Nordstrom's, Macy's area fixed. That is the center of town. And if all the parties come together and you see, a real redevelopment of that project with residential and some office, and you see that's going to shoot a huge bunch of life back into that center of town that's devoid right now.
So I'm just going to throw it out there. We've heard multiple consultant reports over the years. It's been 5 or 6 years now, say city's part of the problem in terms of its review process, its permitting process. It slows down businesses. Things take too long. Permits are not processed in a timely fashion. Is that still a real thing? Is that still happening now? And is that still part of the reason why we're not seeing more vibrancy? And then let me just add one thing before you answer that. When I talked to Jason Harris, economic development manager for the city, about Paseo Nuevo, he said one thing to me that was clear in my interview. He said, the city of Santa Barbara is in the passenger seat when it comes to Paseo Nuevo. And so I'm wondering, does the city need to take the wheel here, and how much of the problem is the city, whether it's lack of leadership or whatever the reason is? How much of it is the city?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like the analogy of the passenger seat. I'd rather say that, usually have co-pilots on a plane. I mean, I think nothing's going to happen there without the city being actively involved on Paseo Nuevo with the owner of the Nordstrom's property and the Macy's/mall property. I mean, they're all tied to one another. The city owns the dirt beneath those properties, and also controls what can be done there. So I don't think the passenger seat's a good analogy. And I haven't heard that the city. I think the city is trying to do better with housing. They understand we need housing downtown. They recently approved a project above the Sur La Table, which I was quite surprised about, that indicated to me that they're serious about seeing more housing down there, which was terrific. But and a lot of those people are very, very good people. I mean, I work with a lot of I mostly work with the city of Goleta officials, not as much with the city of Santa Barbara, but they're all good people. They're hamstrung with all the regulations and rules and all that. And somehow we need to get those more streamlined and efficient. I mean, that I think that's the bigger issue. I think we also have a changing of the guard. We have Rebecca and Eli have now come in at the city of Santa Barbara. And I think my perception is, and just meeting them briefly once recently, that they're really behind seeing housing down and downtown Santa Barbara, and they want to see them all, re-envisioned, and I think that's a good thing, and I'll be very, very surprised if we don't see something interesting happen at Paseo Nuevo that includes a lot of housing and some office. And I'll be very surprised if we don't see the La Cumbre Mall completely blown up at some point and in a new mixed use, community there. And I mean, those are just obvious things that need to be done. It's just a matter of how can we get there and how long it's going to take, and we're going to need the city to help us. I mean, the city, I don't. They're not the passenger. I think they're the co-pilot on these things.
Well, good transition. I want to ask you about La Cumbre Plaza. I'm not going to relive the whole thing here, but do you have any thoughts on the Taylor project? That I think it's something like 1,500 units. The city wants a specific plan. There's a third property owner that's going to come in with their own housing project from this Arizona real estate developer. City's like, hey, let's all work together to do this right. And the Taylors are like, SB 330 right now. Let's get it done. We're not going to wait for your specific plan. You guys have been trying this for years and it hasn't happened. So they want to go. Then there's the actual mall in the middle, right? Not the old Sears and not the old Macy's building or the current Macy's building. So they have their own little stake here. If you were Francois able to just make it all happen the way it should, what would you do?
Well, I already said, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer to do a mixed-use project on that whole site. The mall has been dead for years. Nobody goes past Lure. You go to Lure, you go to Starbucks, and then, or maybe Williams-Sonoma, and then you go back into the mall and it's completely dead.
I go to the Go store every Christmas season, and I go to Islands. That's it.
All right. Well, it's a dead mall. And it needs to be transitioned, and it's obviously centrally located to everything. And we need housing, and it is a great site for what the Taylors are planning on doing. Now, how many units? I don't know how many units the project or the should support. I honestly don't know. I mean, I think We're obviously going to want to see 3 or 4 story buildings there, and get good density, but it's also going to make sense in terms of parking and traffic and all that. But it's to me, it's a no-brainer to knock down the Macy's and the mall and the Sears building and do a new mixed-use project that would be not only good for the area in terms of housing, it also be good amenity for the whole city. We have this just a greatly underutilized site. I'm frankly, I'm even more passionate about La Cumbre being blown up than Paseo Nuevo being re-envisioned. I think the La Cumbre Mall is just a waste right now. It's criminal that all that space is vacant and not being used with all that parking and where it could be just a great housing site. And then just to clarify one thing you said earlier, it's really not 3 owners; it's really 2 owners.
There's a lease, yeah.
Yeah, the Taylors, basically purchased the Macy's building and about half the mall. Yeah. And then the other half the mall plus the Sears building is owned by another old Santa Barbara family. And you mentioned that they've been in talks with a developer out of Arizona to do housing and whatever over there. And I think that's great. I really think that's what it should be. And I'm sure many people are going to find problems with that in terms of traffic and whatnot. But I think that's what it has to be. And it's another site that needs to be repurposed and reimagined. It's something that was built many, many decades ago that's no longer working. So,
hey, Francois, can it be reimagined independently, or do you think what City of Santa Barbara has been saying, and you mentioned how much you value Eli and Rebecca just a few minutes ago, is it better to do it all holistically as a specific plan, or allow these developers to sort of do it at their own pace?
I don't have a strong position on that, Josh. I
just want to see it fixed.
Okay. I want to see it happen, know, and I think anything that makes it happen quicker would be better, So I guess the answer is if a specific plan would make it happen quicker, I would say yes, but I don't think that's the case. I think a specific plan will just slow things down and not produce housing and a re-envisioned site as quick as we would like to see it, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that Taylor project won't create such a huge sort of backlash once they actually talk about it publicly that it slows it down, or if they just move ahead and, we see a new, we'll see.
Any big project's going to get a lot of attention and controversy. I find it hard to believe that anyone wouldn't think that would be a good way to redevelop that site. A mixed use, housing community that also has some affordable housing and moderate housing and whatever else. But that's just a great site for that. And, it's also not a coincidence that every single one of our department stores is basically shuttered. So it's just probably a matter of time before Macy's does that as well. I mean, think about it. We had I. Magnin like 20 years ago shut, and now as the bankruptcy court, we had Amazon take over the Saks Fifth Avenue property. Now we have Macy's and Nordstrom's vacant. I mean, so those are the last 2 department stores, and they're next on the chopping block. They're going to get either torn down or redone.
Yeah, there's nothing like going up and down that escalator during Christmas time, though. So I will miss that. But let me ask you this: speaking of success, let's go to the Camino Real marketplace. Okay.
Yeah.
That place is the core of Goleta when it comes to shopping and retail and experience. And you've got the movie theater there, and you've got all these little places to eat. And then there's the Home Depot, and there's stores there, and the Costco's nearby. And it's like this really vibrant area. And I swear it's like Disneyland parking lot sometimes. When you're there, it's just no place to park. You got the Tesla charging stations. It's a very vibrant. What are they doing right that other places are not?
Well, I mean, that's really a big box service retail center. I mean, where you have a Home Depot and Costco that everyone, and now a Target across the way that everyone in the whole town uses. It's not just people in Goleta. Yeah. I remember when that project was first getting proposed, and everyone was complaining about that as well. I'll bet a lot of money that almost everyone in the whole town from Carp to Goleta goes there. For their goods at Home Depot and Costco. But, that's more of like a, power center with, I would say daily needs, retail, Goleta has actually done way better than Santa Barbara has through this whole pandemic and retail. I mean, all the retail properties in Goleta are pretty much full. And they've got good parking, street parking in front of them, and they're, big box type tenants that serve a lot of needs for the community. Whereas like the downtown, a lot of those were like soft good retailers. A lot of that stuff I think has transitioned online. I think the days of shopping on second and third floors are no longer. So all those buildings you're talking about are all single story buildings, Josh, where you can walk in and they're kind of like almost warehouse type structures, and people go and buy their goods. So it's just a different product. You can't really do that in downtown Santa Barbara. I mean, I guess you might be able to do it at La Cumbre, but I don't think that's the highest and best use for it. You go to the Calle Real Center, in Goleta too. And it's there's some vacancies there, but not very many. And there's just tons of people going and shopping there for their daily needs, a lot of these grocery anchored, retail centers have done very well. You go to 5 Points. Look at 5 Points right across the street from La Cumbre. I mean,
talk about not being able to park.
Yeah, you can't find a parking spot, right? I mean, and it's the same type of retail. It's that kind of daily needs retail, whereas the soft goods, clothing, department stores are dinosaurs. They're done. They're the way of the dodo.
Yeah. And even mention Old Town Goleta. Old Town Goleta is super vibrant too. It serves the needs of the locals with, the neighborhoods there, but all of Goleta in its own way is really vibrant.
Yeah, no, Goleta's actually done much better overall than downtown Santa Barbara through this whole pandemic, and still continues to do better. And there's reasons for that. I mean, obviously it's less expensive, and it's got UCSB, and it's got the airport, and there's some things that I think are just people like to be in Goleta versus downtown Santa Barbara. Again, it's more suburban, so I don't know. But it's definitely, I mean, when I do all my big shopping, I go out to Best Buy or Home Depot or Costco, and I live in Santa Barbara. That's where I go shopping. So. And
you're certainly not going to that little Target in Santa Barbara. You're coming to the real Target.
I have gone to that one, actually. My daughter likes to go to that one, but
that one has an escalator. That old speaking of odd commercial developments from back in the day, that old Z Gallery sort of place,
I've been around long enough to remember when the Galleria opened, before, and that was like a super hot spot. It had like Polo in it and all kinds of high-end retailers, and it just ended up not working, and then the mall kind of followed suit and tried to put, the Louis Vuittons and the high, the high-end retailers at La Cumbre, and that didn't work either. And so I think we know on Upper State Street that we should probably stay away from high-end retail, but probably focus on more daily needs and restaurants and housing. I mean, that's really what is needed up there.
Great. Hey, Francois, this has been a really good conversation about so much of what's happening in commercial real estate. But before we wrap up, I want to ask you a little bit about you. I was looking at your bio, and you were a UCSB grad, and you are a former college soccer player. And I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your story and how you came to Santa Barbara, and, your athletic days, just a little bit about how you got into this business too.
Yeah, well, thanks, Josh. I came to UCSB in 1989 to come play soccer, and I was about 70 pounds lighter back in the day, and came here because I thought it was the greatest place on the planet when I first visited, and had a couple of friends that played on the soccer team here, and then met my wife at UCSB and had 2 kids here, never left, and we've been really, really fortunate living in Santa Barbara for the past 32, 33 years. Seen the town change, but I say overall, it really, I think it's still the same great place that I came to when I got here in 1989. I really wish the downtown area was, felt better and looked better and all that. That's probably the one thing that has changed negatively, but overall, I've been just very happy being here. I founded this company 27 years ago with Steve Hayes, or 1997, 26 years ago. Steve Hayes and I have been partners ever since. We've grown from 2 people to about 18 people, and just love what I do on a daily basis. I'm planning on keep doing it. I actually met the reason why I got into commercial real estate was I met a guy named Jerry Beaver who used to own. Believe it or not, the company was called Beaver Free Corp when I started, and then it changed into Pacifica. But worked there for 6 years before I joined Steve, and I've never done anything else. I never had really a real interview or a resume. I met Jerry Beaver at a cocktail party, convinced him that he needed an internship when I was 20 years old, and the rest is history. So anyway, it's been a good run.
Persistence and hard work opened the door for you, so that's great. Where did you grow up? Where did you come from?
Grew up in Sacramento, so Citrus Heights, Roseville area. My mom's still upset that I haven't come back, but I think when I got down here, I think she knew that I was never going to return. So, but it was a good place to grow up. But I'm happy to be here. The weather's a lot better, that's for sure. Not as hot during the summers.
Not everybody gets to play college sports, college soccer. Can you just talk about what it was about that sport that appealed to you, and maybe just like how you got into it?
Yeah, no, I grew up playing soccer since I was a little kid, since I was probably 6, and I ended up playing on the Olympic development team when I was 17 years old, the year before I went to college. So I was recruited to go to a bunch of different schools, and I just happened to know a couple players down here at UCSB that kind of had an influence in getting me here, and then played for 3 years. I didn't play for my senior year. I was kind of plagued with injuries during college, but just loved it. Met Bob Tueller, who's at Radius. He was one of my assistant coaches when I was out there. He was a goalie at UCSB about a decade and a half before me. And then Tim Baumstieg, who's the current coach out at UCSB. He was my center fullback my freshman year when I was the right fullback. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of neat seeing him, knowing him for at least a year, playing with him, and then seeing what he's done with the team. I mean, we were always a Division I soccer team when I was there, but we're now the last 10 years have been a whole different level. I mean, they've won the national championship. They took second. They're regularly top 25 team in the country. And, to be honest, we were not that team when I was out there. We were a good team, but we were not a great team like they are today.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's so awesome. I got to go dig up those pictures of you now and see what you look like back in the day.
A lot more fit. A lot more fit.
Sure we all were. It's okay.
Yeah, we all were, right? Yeah, but no, it's good. And then I ended up coaching both my kids soccer for probably 10 years. Now my kids are 16 and 19, so one's in college and one's getting close to getting to college. And so I did my AOISO years. Those were long and fun and hard. About 10 years of coaching, but now I've got a little bit more free time on my hands as my kids. My son's in college at Chapman University, and my daughter is, she's a teenage girl, wants to kind of do her own thing. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I have a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. So
wow.
That's I get all that. So
that's quite a span. So did you grow up in Santa Barbara, Josh, or?
Yeah, I was born at Goleta Valley Hospital. So it's cottage now out in Goleta. But yeah, my parents were renters, so we moved around a lot. But yeah, I went to 5 different elementary schools, and Goleta, Santa Barbara. I went to Peabody, the old Wilson School, Isla Vista Elementary, Elwood, a whole bunch of different schools that I went to. But yeah, I grew up here and only went away for a few years for college. And then I worked at San Jose Mercury News for a while in the Bay Area for a couple of years. And like a lot of people, it's like, I got to get back. This is the best place in the world. So, I want to.
Yeah, and sometimes that's hard when you're complaining about what's going on State Street. And you do realize, you still live in probably one of the prettiest and best places in the world. But I think all of us that have been here for a long time, we'd love to see it, continue to be a great place and our kids can enjoy. And I think there's been some things that have deteriorated that I'm hoping that bounce back, over time. So.
Yeah. Well, Francois DeJohn, great conversation. I really appreciate you making time here. And Thanks a lot for just educating me and the audience on all the latest commercial real estate trends and offering your expertise and wisdom. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.